Conflict is a part of life. It happens in our relationships, at work, with friends, even with strangers. And the truth is, it's not about avoiding conflict, but about how we choose to handle it. Because anyone can react emotionally in the heat of the moment, but handling it with maturity is what sets you apart. It's what earns respect, builds trust, and keeps relationships stronger instead of breaking them. Staying calm when emotions rise is one of the most powerful skills you can ever develop in handling conflict. Because the truth is, the very first thing that usually goes out of the window when tension shows up is self-control. The heart rate climbs, the voice raises, the hands move faster, and before you even realize it, you're reacting instead of responding. And that is exactly where conflicts turn from small misunderstandings into full-blown battles. But emotional maturity means you understand that the moment you lose control of your emotions, you also lose control of the situation. You hand the steering wheel over to the conflict itself and let it drive you wherever it wants. And that usually leads to regret, broken trust, and words you wish you could take back. Composure in conflict is not about pretending nothing bothers you. It's about proving to yourself that you can handle being uncomfortable without letting it ruin your judgment. The strength of calmness in conflict is often underestimated because people assume that whoever talks the loudest or gets angriest is the one in control. But the opposite is true. The calm person is the one who holds the power because they are not being dragged around by emotion. Think about how uncomfortable silence can be when someone expects a fight. They throw words at you waiting for you to bite back. But when you don't give them that satisfaction, the fire they were expecting simply doesn't ignite. Silence can speak louder than yelling ever could because it shows that you are not willing to let your peace be stolen so easily. Calmness keeps the situation from escalating into something that goes beyond repair. It also gives you time to think. When you are calm, you have the space to choose your words carefully instead of spitting out the first sharp thought that comes to your mind. Anger makes you reactive, but calmness makes you intentional, and intentional words are always more effective in resolving conflict by slowing down and breathing. Before you speak, you put yourself in a position where your mind works faster than your temper, and that makes you the one guiding the direction of the conversation instead of being dragged by the storm. Composure creates clarity, and clarity is what allows solutions to appear. Another reason calmness matters so much is because emotions are contagious. If you lose your cool in a conflict, you give the other person permission to do the same. The energy bounces back and forth until both people are worked up and the original problem is buried under layers of shouting and defensiveness. But if one person stays calm, it becomes much harder for the other person to keep fueling the fire. Your calmness becomes the anchor in the middle of the storm, and often it forces the other person to match your energy rather than you matching theirs. That is why being calm isn't passive, it is influence. It sets the emotional tone of the interaction. Staying calm doesn't mean you are weak or that you are letting the other person win. In fact, it takes far more strength to hold your tongue and keep your composure than it does to lash out. Anyone can explode in anger, but it takes real maturity to stand firm, breathe, and maintain control. Calmness doesn't suppress your feelings. It gives you the ability to channel them in the right direction, to use them as information instead of letting them use you as fuel. Calmness tells the other person that you are serious, that you respect yourself enough not to be dragged into a shouting match, and that you are focused on resolution, not destruction. The more you practice staying calm in conflict, the stronger you become, because every time you succeed in holding back the quick reaction, you build resilience. You train your brain to pause before responding, and over time, that pause becomes natural. Your ability to remain calm, even when provoked, becomes your greatest advantage, because calm people are trusted, respected, and seen as dependable. And in conflict, people will always gravitate toward the one who is steady rather than the one who is unstable. Calmness turns a potential argument into an opportunity for understanding. It transforms conflict from a battle into a conversation. and it keeps you in the driver's seat no matter how heated the situation tries to become. Listening first before you respond is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to handle conflict in an emotionally mature way, because most of the time, arguments don't explode because of the actual issue, but because people don't feel heard. When someone is upset, what they want more than anything is to know that their perspective matters, that their feelings have weight, and that their voice isn't being drowned out or dismissed. When you interrupt, defend yourself too quickly, or cut them off mid-sentence, you communicate that your point matters more than theirs, and that instantly fuels defensiveness. But when you sit back, keep eye contact, and allow them to speak fully without rushing to reply, you create a space of respect and trust. Listening is not about agreeing, but about showing that you care enough to give your attention. In conflict, listening first disarms tension because people expect resistance. They expect you to push back the moment they say something you don't like. And when you don't do that, it throws them off guard in the best way. Instead of preparing to fight, they feel the pressure ease because you're not trying to dominate the conversation. You're trying to understand, and understanding is the bridge that leads to resolution. Listening communicates maturity because it proves you value the relationship over winning the argument. It tells the other person you're not here to battle them, but to work with them. And that simple shift changes the whole tone of the conversation. When you truly listen, you're not just hearing words, you're paying attention to what's underneath them. You're noticing the emotion behind the voice, the frustration behind the complaint, or the hurt behind the anger, because conflict is almost never about the surface issue. It's about the deeper feelings that aren't being acknowledged. When you listen for those emotions, you show empathy, and empathy is what diffuses hostility faster than any sharp comeback ever could. People soften when they feel understood. Even if the problem isn't solved yet, the fact that they don't have to fight to be heard makes them more willing to collaborate instead of confront. Listening also gives you clarity, because if you rush to respond without hearing the full picture, you may end up defending yourself against something they weren't even saying. Many arguments spiral simply because one or both sides jump to conclusions instead of letting the other finish. But when you slow down and hear the entire thought before replying, you prevent unnecessary misunderstandings. You give yourself the information you need to respond wisely, and you show that your goal is not to win, but to resolve. Listening is gathering data, and the more data you have, the better equipped you are to handle the situation effectively. Another reason listening matters so much in conflict is because it creates reciprocity. When you listen deeply without cutting in, the other person often feels obligated to give you the same courtesy when it's your turn to speak. You've modeled the behavior you want from them, and most people naturally mirror that back. But even if they don't, you've still elevated yourself above the chaos. You've shown that your maturity doesn't depend on how they act, but on who you choose to be. Listening first is leading by example, and that kind of leadership has a way of calming storms that arguments never could. It's also important to remember that listening doesn't mean staying silent with a blank face until the other person stops talking. It's active, it's nodding, acknowledging, asking clarifying questions, repeating back what you heard to make sure you understood. These small actions let the other person know you're engaged, that their words are landing, and that you're not just waiting for your turn. Active listening builds connection in the middle of conflict, and connection is what makes resolution possible, because at the heart of every conflict is usually a disconnection that needs to be repaired. Practicing listening first before responding trains you to pause, and that pause is powerful because it breaks the cycle of reaction. Instead of clashing with emotion against emotion, you slow the pace down, you reset the energy in the room, and you allow the conflict to be guided rather than spiraling out of control. People respect the one who can stay calm and listen because it shows emotional strength. And it shows that even in disagreement, you value the other person enough to give them your attention. Listening doesn't solve everything, but it sets the foundation for everything to be solved. Separating the problem from the person is one of the most crucial skills in dealing with conflict in an emotionally mature way, because what most people do in heated situations is blur the line between the issue and the individual. Instead of focusing on the actual challenge, they begin attacking the character, the habits, or the personality of the other person. And once that happens, the conflict stops being about solving something and becomes about defending oneself. When you point fingers and use words like "you always" or "you never," the other person instantly feels attacked, their walls go up, and their willingness to listen disappears. But when you intentionally separate the behavior or the issue from who they are as a person, you create space for solutions instead of hostility. You let them know that while you may not be okay with what happened, you still respect them as an individual, and that makes a massive difference in how the conflict unfolds. Think about how easy it is for someone to shut down when they feel personally attacked. Even if you are right about the problem, they will stop hearing you because they're too busy defending their worth. But when you frame the conflict around the issue itself rather than their identity, you show them you are not trying to tear them down. You are trying to work with them to address what went wrong. This shift communicates maturity because it proves you know how to separate a moment of tension from the bigger picture of who that person is, and it makes it possible to fix the situation without breaking the relationship. It turns what could feel like an accusation into a conversation about improvement. When you attack the person instead of the problem, the conflict grows roots in resentment. But when you address the problem itself, it opens the door to collaboration. It's no longer you versus them. It becomes both of you versus the issue, and that subtle shift can completely change the energy of the discussion. Collaboration makes the other person feel like you are on the same side, like you want to find a way forward together instead of proving who is right and who is wrong. This approach softens resistance because it's easier to accept feedback when it doesn't feel like an attack on your entire character. It feels like teamwork, and teamwork in conflict builds respect instead of tearing it down. Another reason separating the problem from the person is so powerful is because it keeps your language from turning destructive. The moment you let anger spill into your words about the other person, you introduce judgment, blame, and criticism that hit deeper than you realize. Those words don't just affect the current argument, they stay with the person and can damage trust for a long time. But when you are intentional and choose to describe the behavior instead of labeling the person, you keep the door open for growth. You show them that the issue can be fixed without them feeling like they themselves are broken, and that makes them much more likely to receive what you are saying. This mindset also protects your own emotional balance because when you blur the line between the issue and the individual, you feed your anger by telling yourself a story about who they are rather than focusing on what actually happened. It becomes easy to exaggerate, to bring up old mistakes, or to pile multiple frustrations onto one moment. But when you discipline yourself to deal only with the current issue, you stop yourself from spiraling. You give the conflict boundaries, and those boundaries prevent the disagreement from consuming the entire relationship. Separating the problem from the person is not just about protecting them, it's about protecting you from your own unchecked emotions. It also models maturity that invites respect. Because when people see that you can disagree strongly about an issue without attacking them personally, they learn to trust that being in conflict with you is safe. They don't have to fear being torn down or humiliated. They know you will stay on the problem and not on personal insults. And that security makes future conflicts easier to handle because they know you value the relationship enough to protect it, even when things get hard. Separating the problem from the person is how you preserve dignity in conflict. And dignity is what allows resolution to last instead of leaving invisible scars that never heal. Practicing this skill takes discipline because in the heat of emotion, it feels natural to lash out. But the more you train yourself to pause, breathe, and reframe your words so that they target the issue instead of the individual, the more you build the habit of mature conflict. And with time, you realize that most disagreements don't have to become personal battles at all. They can be handled as shared challenges, challenges that bring growth instead of bitterness, challenges that strengthen respect instead of tearing it down, and challenges that prove that emotional maturity always turns conflict into an opportunity for deeper understanding. Choosing your words carefully in the middle of conflict is one of the strongest demonstrations of emotional maturity because words are never neutral. They either build or break, they either calm or inflame. They either move a conversation forward or lock it in place. Most conflicts spiral out of control, not because of the original problem, but because of the words that were chosen in the heat of the moment. When frustration rises, the easiest thing to do is to let your tongue run faster than your mind, to use sarcasm, harsh tones, accusations, or cutting remarks. And those words have a way of sinking deep and leaving damage long after the conflict is over. But when you discipline yourself to pause and select words that respect the other person, even while disagreeing, you set a tone that keeps the discussion from turning destructive. Careful words don't mean you water down your truth. They mean you deliver it in a way that can actually be heard. Think about the difference between saying, "You never listen to me," and saying, "I feel unheard when I try to explain my perspective." The first statement immediately puts the other person on the defensive because it attacks their character. The second one communicates the same frustration but keeps the focus on the issue. It opens the door for understanding rather than slamming it shut. This is the power of choosing words carefully. It's not about being fake or sugarcoating, but about using language that doesn't make the other person feel attacked. Because when someone feels attacked, their walls go up and their ears shut down. But when your words are intentional, they make space for progress, even in disagreement. Carefully chosen words are also about tone, because tone often speaks louder than the words themselves. You can say the right sentence with the wrong tone and still create conflict. Calm and steady tones signal self-control. They show that you are here to solve, not to escalate. They communicate strength without aggression, and they allow the other person to stay engaged instead of feeling like they have to fight back. Tone is the vehicle that carries your message, and if the vehicle is aggressive, your message gets lost no matter how wise your words are. But if the vehicle is calm, your words are far more likely to land where they need to. Another layer to this is timing. Sometimes the most careful words said at the wrong moment can still make things worse. Part of choosing your words carefully is also knowing when to say them. Emotional maturity means recognizing that certain moments are too charged for productive dialogue, and sometimes silence is the wisest choice until both sides are ready to hear. Waiting for the right moment doesn't mean you avoid the conversation. It means you care enough about the outcome to not waste your words when they won't have any effect. Maturity isn't just what you say, but when you choose to say it. Choosing your words carefully also helps protect the relationship long term, because conflicts will come and go, but the words spoken during them often leave lasting marks. Once you say something cruel, you cannot erase it. Apologies may be offered, but the memory lingers, and sometimes people forgive, but they do not forget. Guarding your words means you value the relationship enough not to risk permanent scars over temporary emotions. It means you recognize that people replay conversations in their minds long after they're over, and they remember not only what was said, but how it made them feel. When your words are careful, you give them something constructive to hold on to instead of something painful. It's also important to remember that choosing your words carefully is not just for the benefit of the other person, it's for you as well. When you keep your language respectful, you preserve your own dignity. You won't look back in shame or regret over things you let slip in anger. You won't have to repair damage that your tongue created in a moment of heat. Careful words allow you to walk away from a conflict knowing you stayed true to your values, that you didn't let the chaos pull you into becoming someone you're not, Words are reflections of self-control, and when you master them, you show yourself and others that you are not controlled by the conflict, but by your character. The more you practice careful speech in difficult moments, the more natural it becomes. At first, it takes effort to hold back the quick retort, the sarcastic jab, or the cutting remark, but over time, you train your mind to filter before speaking, and that filter is what saves relationships, what keeps respect intact, and what turns disagreements into opportunities for growth instead of reasons for distance. Words are tools, and in conflict, they can either be used as weapons that destroy or as bridges that connect. The choice is always in your control. Being willing to let go of being right is one of the clearest signs of emotional maturity in conflict. Because the truth is, most arguments are not about truth or facts. They are about ego, the need to prove a point, the desire to have the last word, and the craving to walk away feeling like you won. But winning an argument does not always mean winning in life. Sometimes victory in a conflict leaves behind broken trust, hurt feelings, or damaged relationships. And what feels like a win in the moment often becomes a loss in the long run. Maturity means understanding that peace and connection are often far more valuable than proving yourself correct. It means realizing that you don't have to attend every fight you are invited to, and that not every disagreement needs a winner or loser. Letting go of being right does not mean you deny your perspective or pretend the other person is correct when they are not. It means you are secure enough to not let your self-worth depend on whether someone else agrees with you. When you release the need to always win, you give space for understanding and compromise. You show the other person that you value the relationship more than the argument, and that simple shift can calm even the most heated discussions, because nothing escalates conflict faster than two egos battling for dominance. But nothing diffuses it faster than one person deciding that preserving respect is more important than being crowned the winner. This willingness to let go of being right is also a sign of confidence, because insecure people feel the need to constantly defend themselves and prove they are smarter, wiser, or stronger. But secure people understand that their value is not on trial in every conflict. They don't have to prove themselves with every word. They can choose peace without feeling like they lost, and in doing so, they show strength that often earns greater respect than any argument ever could. Walking away from the need to win does not make you weak. It makes you wise, because wisdom knows that ego battles only drain energy while peace builds stability.